he plays T side 30 rounds of the map. It doesn't matter. Like, honestly.
W all the way. Yeah.
That's quotable. That's very quotable.
So yeah, look, anyway, the reason why I've gone for him, and I think the most interesting thing to talk about, and the thing that I want to hear from all of you guys is the configuration of the roles that your riflers are going to play in your team.
Okay, we're here for episode 5 of Geographically Challenged. Who knew we would get this far, and who knew that Nikh would be invited back again? We had such a good time with you last time, learning about the Southeast Asian Counter-Strike scene and all of that stuff. We're more or less doing the exact same thing we did last time with you again, but for the Chinese region. So it sort of makes sense to have you back. Obviously, nice for you to be here. Good for you to be back as well, Pili and Bleh. Nice to see you again, guys. How's everyone feeling? Bleh, I know you've been doing a little bit of Road to Rio, so you're a bit cooked at the moment, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm just operating on some pretty shitty sleep cycle and lack of sleep. But the games have been great. The E games have been great. CS is wild. It's a wild ride. Very, very, very reminiscent of Asian Counter-Strike. The peaks are obviously better, but the lows are holy shit. It's just some pretty wild Counter-Strike out there.
Yeah, so speaking of Road to Rio, now would probably be a good time to say go and watch the Asian and the ANZ part of Road to Rio, because that is, once this video gets released, going to be actually live. Basically, when this video is released, Pili and I are going to be casting Road to Rio. So I love it if you watch the video and watch Road to Rio at the same time and consume all of my content. That would be fantastic.
You can just plug it in when you're casting.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah, exactly. And anyway, so go and watch that. We'll do a big episode next week, probably breaking down all the results and what happened there. But before we do get too far into that discussion, let's go ahead and dive into what is happening today on Geographically Challenged. So you might have already figured it out based on the title of the video and what we've just been talking about. But if you remember in episode 3, before we did our episode with Gomez, we designed our perfect English-speaking Asian team. And one of the things with that was that you pretty much couldn't pick any Chinese players because they don't speak English as a general rule. Yep. So now we sort of wanted to do a Chinese dream team. And this has also been sort of spurned on by the fact that Tyloo have now more or less amalgamated a full Chinese roster after getting rid of Freeman and Zeta as well. So there's a lot going on there. And once we've done with that discussion, we'll also talk a little bit about this new tournament that's happening in China as well. So it's more or less a Chinese episode for episode 5 here of Geographically Challenged. So we hope you enjoy it. I hope you're interested. Just to start off with the caveats for this roster, obviously, again, we had a few caveats for the last one. This time, the player has to be Chinese. Again, personality conflicts and whatever are not taken into account. The player has to currently be competing within the Asian region. Not that I think there are any Chinese players that are playing internationally anyway. And obviously, we all had to sort of specify our IGL and our AWPer. So let's go ahead and bring up the teams here, and we'll have a look and see where we sort of align on and where we don't align on. To start things off, it's no real surprise that we've all got Advent as the IGL. So let's start with you, Pili. You've been a little bit out of the conversation so far, and I know you're a big fan of Advent. One of the reasons that you have Vici up towards the top of your Asia rankings, or maybe at the top of your Asia rankings, barring Renegades, I suppose. Tell me about Advent. Tell me why he's so good.
I mean, he's probably the best in-game leader in the Chinese scene. A little while ago, there might have been a couple more choices. I remember they might have had TB leading some teams, Savage leading some teams with the experience that they have coming into the Chinese scene. But Advent's been by far the most successful pure in-game leader. I mean, whenever I think of the Advent highlights, it's going up against Tyloo regionally, or it's that Katowice run. I think it was 2019, where they actually took some maps off of some pretty good European teams, and I think they barely didn't make it out of their last stage there. They went 2-3 or something tend to have a little bit more trouble when they headed into those best of threes. And I just wanted to let everyone know my theme for my team is this is what happens when you actually put a primary AWPer and an in-game leader on Tyloo.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I probably was the lines that a lot of other people were thinking along as well, although I see you guys got some interesting picks as well.
We do. We won't go too far down that discussion because right now, at least what I'm intending to do in the edit is to blur everything that we haven't talked about. So everyone can only see Advent at the moment. So we'll talk about the AWPers and all that a little bit later on. But let's just keep talking about Advent here. I know that obviously Advent is a pretty... he's the choice within the Chinese scene at the moment. But Bleh, noting that the idea of this team is to make the best possible team within China that could compete internationally, does it feel realistic to think that someone like Advent is a leader of a team or a person that can lead a team to a degree of success against international competition? Because, we look at Vici in the past, we look at Advent's teams in the past, and I would say he hasn't had that much success internationally.
He hasn't. I do agree, but the one event that stands out, and this is an event which you don't really have to go all the way back, was IEM Katowice last year, right? We had the minors. It was a very hard fight for them, but they did manage to qualify. They had to play in the playoffs, the play-ins. You're right. They beat North, pretty big win back then. And even in the majors, the major qualifiers, they had a pretty good run. And that is with the fact that I was working with Alman and Zhoking. Two players who are highly inconsistent. They are not the sort of foundation you want to build a team on. Even with that, he was able to go so very far, right? And then you look at the rest of the year, yes, we haven't really seen them because they keep losing to Tyloo or the visa issues and whatnot. He's got the brains, he's got the chops. And the fact that he still manages to work with what's given to him, I think impresses me a lot. Especially JamYoung. This guy is a pugger. He's just a pure pugger. Gets picked up, and all of a sudden, he not just replaces Freeman, but he even looks better than Freeman right now. That's incredible, the way he's worked. Look at Freeman as well. Look at how good he was on Vici, how impactful he was, and how he just fell off when he joined Tyloo, despite being such a very solid player, right? So I think as an in-game leader, as an IGL, as a leader, as someone who can activate these sort of players, there is no one, not just in China, but no one in Asia who can do as good a job as Advent. So whether you're asking for a Chinese team or an Asian team or whatever mix of players you want to have in Asia, I want Advent there.
Okay.
Unfortunately, he can't speak English, so that's the unfortunate fact here. But yeah.
Okay, so let's go ahead and throw a little bit of a curveball here. In our theory crafting for our last team, it was English-speaking caveat, and you were obviously talking a lot about Urcast. So let's forget about that. Let's say that it doesn't matter whether or not they can speak English or Chinese or whatever, that they can communicate perfectly. Do you have Advent or do you have Urcast for that team?
I have Advent.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Advent
has impressed me more. Remember, Urcast has never really fully in-game led properly, right? It was always Dexter doing it. And I'm not saying he doesn't know how to work as an in-game leader. And yes, he is definitely frag better than Advent. But Advent, I feel, is the better complete package, especially with IGLing role. He is the Asian Hunden. I'll take that.
Okay, fair enough. Then, Nikh, let's talk about this from your perspective as well. And I know I might sort of throw you under the bus a little bit with this question, but I think it's fair to say, and if you guys can tell me if I'm wrong with this assumption or the way that I'm feeling here, but Tyloo has always been the team that has had the better players, like the individuals, the firepower, and yet Advent is the guy that, obviously is still up there. He's always in the team that is second best, maybe sometimes the best in China. Do you feel like he's been kind of gatekept by the talent that he's had on his roster? In that, let's say, for example, he was on Tyloo. Would that be like the dream team?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, so one of the caveats for this whole thing as well is like when you said the Chinese super team, and in some ways, Tyloo's current like test roster is that Chinese super team, right? Barring like all the real life limitations that you have, like contracts and like who can actually work with who and personality and stuff. So a lot of the people in the Chinese scene actually think that roster is like the new quote unquote super team. But if we were to do this hypothetical test, and I think, yes, Advent definitely was sort of like, because he always played on like Vici or like that group of players that were part of like the Vici. There's always like two camps in China, right? Which is like the Tyloo Vici camp, so to speak, or in that sense, the tier 1, tier 2 team. And then everything else is like its own tier 100 in China you know. So you just have like 1, 2, and then the rest, kind of like the Oceanic scene, right? You always have those top 2 teams, and then 3 to 10 is just like a shit show. So like, I would say Advent is he's like the leader of that one camp, and then you got, you know, the ex-Captain Mo DD crew, which is the leader of Camp A, right? So yeah, I mean, if Advent was given the chance to play with that like Tyloo camp of players, you know, and at some point you also had like Summer and Attacker leaving Tyloo, going to VG Flash, right? And there was like that experiment going on there. So, and Advent was actually kicked out of Vici for a while, for I think about half a year or something, and then he came back. So that has something to do with this whole issue as well, of like him sort of trying to fit but not being able to fit, and then having his resurrection, and now he's kind of like unanimously all of our top pick as an in-game leader. Yeah.
Is that because there's no one else though? Like, is he as good as we've been saying, or are we sort of overhyping him? Bleh, I want to throw this one to you because, you know, I feel like in the past 6 to maybe 6 months only, really, we've only been talking about Advent to this degree.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is an element of truth in what you say here, like, but when you do, like, you know, rate someone, you are, by default, you are comparing him to his peers, right? Who's around him. And that's the thing, like, am I going to compare him to some of the EU or EU or even NA in-game leaders? Of course not. I don't think he's that good. He's not been exposed enough. He doesn't never really work with all the right talent. Let's say, for example, we give him like 4 of the best Danish players, for example, right? Let's assume there's no language barrier. I don't think he's necessarily going to do an incredible job and going to be a godlike tactician. But with the Asian context in mind, I do believe he is up there. Only other potential in-game leader I'd probably bring up would be perhaps some of the Koreans, a couple of the Koreans, but you know, they really haven't done much either. I think Kars is a very good option as well. But I do feel like he would be more fit as a coach. He's very good at the prep work, but I don't feel he's the right person in the server, right? So compared to in Asia, yes, I do believe it's both. He is good. I think he's legit. I think he can still hold his own against some of the international teams out there, but I don't think he really rates as well as, let's say, AWPer, for example, right? I don't think he's anywhere close to his level. And AWPer isn't exactly, in my opinion, like a top 5 in-game leader, but he's got the right elements. But in Asia, he is king.
Okay, speaking to that point then, Pili, was there any other options that you would have considered, or is it pretty much just Advent is the only one? And like, I guess you're probably just going to say Advent was the only one. So to make this a little bit more interesting, if you couldn't have chosen Advent, who would have been on the list? Or would you have even not had an IGL, knowing Chinese CS?
Probably not had an IGL. I probably would have gone for just some crazy Tyloo mix, like they're kind of going for at the moment.
Like Flash Gaming?
Yeah, like Flash Gaming, I mean. I think you'd probably rely on one of the more experienced guys to try to lead the team a little bit more, and I think that's what you're seeing at the moment in Tyloo, with Summer sort of taking over and in-game leading and stuff like that. You know, I don't know if it's necessarily something that he wants to do, because you know, we don't have I don't know about Bleh and Nikh, but at least in Australia we don't have any kind of insight about the actual, you know, personalities of these guys or what their preferences are and stuff like that. But if I was to make some kind of assumption or some kind of speculation, it would be that Summer's probably in-game leading out of necessity, and for that reason I'd probably choose him to be the in-game leader or something like that, because I mean, yeah, you know, Carcer was mentioned, but he hasn't done anything outside of being, you know, Tyloo's coach. He hasn't done shit, so you can't really say that he's going to be a good option, you know?
So no one wants to bring Captain Mo back?
Well, you were going to get to me. I thought you were going to go to Bleh first. But he hasn't done shit, yeah.
He hasn't done shit in 1-3 either, even with some okay players. So that's my big problem with him as well.
Okay, so I want to actually go to you now, Nikh, because I want to go back to what you were saying earlier, that whole sort of analogy about there being the Tyloo camp and there being the Vici camp, and they don't really tend to cross over all that much. And maybe someone else knows the answer to this, but is there a reason for that? Like, is there a reason that Advent has never played on Tyloo, or, you know, he's never been able to get these kind of players underneath him, or what it may be? Is there some sort of unspoken thing that is like everyone knows, but no one wants to talk about?
I think there is, and so I'm trying to say it eloquently. But I mean, it's just to do with like the politics, right? The politics of the scene. so to speak. And it's also like China, like everyone there gets like very big headed once they become popular and famous, and then there's the element of like money that's involved too, and the amount of money that they're throwing. So like one of the caveats you need to know here too is that compared to like the exercise we did before with the English speaking roster, like if that was to be realized, like that team would be paid probably a quarter of what this team would be paid, you know? So that's definitely something that adds a lot of you have to take that into consideration, adds context into like the scale of what this team could be. And that sort of like the companies, the orgs behind these players have a lot to do with them too, right? Without saying that word, you know, the infamous M word, the Italian, if you know what I'm talking about.
No idea what you're talking about.
I'm really
Well,
struggling to think of this word. Maybe type it in for us.
but the long story short is, yeah,
Are you talking about money?
Yeah, talking about money and organized crime,
okay.
that sort of thing.
Okay.
There's a little bit of like interaction there going on, and
Right.
I don't know the details and I don't know the facts, but like you hear enough of it that you start to believe it. Again, I'm not going to believe in like something that hasn't been proven, but
okay, so I know exactly what I'm going to title this episode now.
The Italian M word. There we go.
Yeah, let's see
The
how far we
Italian
can push
M word.
it before Nikh disappears.
Yeah.
I have I've heard almost the same things Nikh has. Nikh probably has a little bit more insight with regards to that. But I can tell you something about in server. I remember when I was casting. This is prior to Vici or the Vici or picking the team, right? But remember the Wings lineup and Karsa and especially Karsa and Advent's old lineups, right? They've gone through so many name changes. I even forget some of the rosters they played with. But I remember there was always a lot of bad blood. A lot of bad blood. There was, I think, one game where Zhoking, they were playing a LAN. It's a Starlighter qualifier, it's a best of 5, and Zhoking wins a round and clutches it out and just stands up, like flips off Tyloo, like right there in front of the camera. I'm like, this is amazing, right? But that was like a fun flipping off. That was literally like, fuck you, I don't fucking like you. And I'm like, something's really off. I remember this one game. It was a finals, and I remember both Tyloo and Vici that get a kill and let's start like shooting the corpse. The round's not done yet. There's someone coming to trade you. He doesn't give a fuck. He's just shooting the corpse.
They just go straight out. I know. I've seen that too.
I'm like, this is wild. So there's always been a lot of bad blood in the server. I do believe that comes from like they're streaming and some players start trash talking to other player and whatnot. It's all egos and whatnot. But I think there are a lot of long issues and long-standing disputes between a lot of these players, especially talking about Advent, Zhoking, and Karsa and Tyloo. So I don't think that's gonna get healed anytime soon.
If I was to add to that, if I can, like you were talking earlier about if there's another IGL other than Advent, right? I mean, we were talking about these distinct camps. There's also, I don't know if you guys remember Shwadapai, Shao Saga, the 5 Power, the R Stars group. Like that's one group right there. And then you've got Karsa and the older players, TB Savage, right? TB Savage is another camp. You know, they have like their own pool, and Advent was sort of part of that TB Savage camp, but he's kind of gone and created his own camp now. And in a lot of ways, you look at it now, you can kind of see where the new blood is coming from, like to Tyloo and to Vici. Like Vici has gone a different route, right? They've taken a more like sensible Advent approach where he's picking players from 5e play and he's picking players like Kaze from abroad and putting them together. And then previously with Freeman, you know, before Freeman joined Tyloo, and Tyloo's kind of gone a slightly different approach. They used to be the ones that like, oh, all the players are going to want to come to play with us because we're the best, right? But that isn't so much the case anymore. Like, you know, you look at where Tyloo is getting their players from. It's the same few teams. eHome, like half their lineup right now is like ex-eHome. They got the core as well. Sorry, not half, but the 2 new players are from ex-eHome. So it's like you can start to see these patterns of like where the camps are. So don't discount.
You kind of tricked my
other
memory. It's like crazy that it was literally like 5 years ago. But you reminded me of that KU team, which was like one of the first teams that went to an international team in China. And I was like, what was the lineup for that? So I had a little Wikipedia. Advent, Allman, Zhoking, Attacker, Karsa, and they had 2 other guys who left in 2015 as well.
Yeah,
which is like that's a crazy lineup.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm happy Nick brought up TB and Savage because that was how the camps laid. They had a Tyloo guys with Captain Mo, and then you had TB and Savage on the other side. And TB Savage always together, right? So
exactly.
the players who used to play with TB and Savage, they would kind of fall in that particular camp, and then some of them would fall with the Tyloo guys. And even once Savage and TB retired, you still had these camps still there, like Karsa and Avon. It just never, the bad blood never went away, basically.
Quite strange.
Someone slept with someone's mother or something. I don't know, dude. Like,
it seems like it, right? Because I look at least at the ANZ scene, which is the one I'm most familiar with, and I really look at that and I say, okay, is there really any team that wouldn't pick up like the best players in the region just because they don't like them? And I'd say, I don't think so. Maybe Pili, you might have a different idea to me, but it seems like a kind of a far-fetched idea.
Not really anymore. I don't think there's really that much bad blood between a lot of the teams or any kind of grudges anymore.
At least within
the main
the top
one
four.
that people will remember is like the Voxy immunity one, and that wasn't even every single player on those teams feeling like that. It was only just a couple of individuals in particular.
Yeah, exactly. So people were generally pretty happy to pick up any individuals that they could get as long as they're a good fit for the team. Anyway, that went on a massive tangent, obviously talking about the bad blood between Tyloo and Vici and whatever else. So let's start moving into the AWP discussion now, and I'm going to unfade it here. And we've got Danking for the majority, Summer for Bleh. Now, Danking is kind of like still a bit of an up-and-comer here within the region, right? I wouldn't say that he's necessarily been in any of the top teams. We've seen a little bit of him in Tyloo, but that sort of ended poorly. So I can sort of fathom a lot of reasons why you wouldn't have Danking in your roster, Bleh. But I want to go to Pili first. I'm going to let this one stew. I want to go to Pili first. I've thrown that sort of caveat out there. So there's so many reasons why you wouldn't have Danking in your roster, but why do you have Danking in your roster?
Because I don't want to have someone who's not a primary AWPer have to be an AWPer, which is another problem with Tyloo at the moment. My whole thesis behind my roster is that it's Tyloo without the problems. So that's what I really tried to go for. And it's interesting that you guys sort of like brought up Savage because honestly, if Savage was still playing and was still as good as he was at one point when he's playing on like CyberZen and stuff like that and actually like hard carrying, I would probably put him on my roster. But unfortunately, here we are in 2020. It's too many years later and your options are reasonably limited.
Yeah, they certainly are. So again, before we jump into the Summer discussion, I'm going to send this one over to you then, Nikh. Is he the kind of player that you just sort of see as someone like, there almost isn't a replacement for Danking in the roster? Because that's the way I felt. Like I looked at this and I thought, yeah, okay, Summer can AWP, but I sort of consider Summer more of a secondary AWPer than a primary AWPer. Yeah. So for me, I was like, okay, let me see if I can actually find an AWPer in China that is better than Danking, is a better prospect than Danking, and I couldn't find one.
Right, exactly. And I mean, it's also like if you're picking like just a dedicated AWPer, like you said, Summer did obviously opt for Tyloo a lot of times, and he's still impressive. Like you can still find clips of him that are like, whoa, he's good. But like even for me, the way I approach this is really just like you said. There's not a lot to watch on Danking unless you like dive deep into the Chinese scene and like look at all of the match pages and all those hundreds of tournaments that they play online there. But for Danking, it's more for me, it's just like hearsay. Like I just constantly hear about him despite all and if anyone knows anything about the drama and stuff that's surrounding this player, but despite all of that negativity that's floating around him, he still emerges as this name that's like, dude, shit, this guy's good, right? This guy's sharp. So it's hard to ignore that. So for me, it was an obvious choice.
Yeah. And the way that I kind of like to look at my roster here is like almost a bit of an optimism roster. It might not be the best team like right now. It might not be the best option, but in 6 months or in 12 months, these very much could be the best players within China or certainly up there. But Bleh, you've obviously gone for a little bit more, I feel like a reserved route, right? You've gone for more of a known quantity in Summer. So first, let's talk about why you haven't chosen Danking, and then let's talk about why you've chosen Summer.
I get to talk about like personality issues and all.
I don't know why you guys are laughing. No, personality issues.
I mean, it's not a thing to laugh about.
But... Yeah, don't count, right? And which is fine. Like he could be selling meth for all I care. I'm fine with him.
He'd be your best friend.
He could be my best friend. It's fine. I'd pick him up. But he doesn't seem committed. He doesn't seem to want to be better from what I've seen. He's just happy just doing whatever, pugging around. Can he learn? Can he listen to someone like Advent? That's important. I mean, personality issues aside, commitment to the game is very, very important. I don't think he really has that. Now, the why I picked Summer is I did not look at going to this team with an AWPer in mind. For me, like, I need an in-game leader, I need an Advent. The other 4 could be anyone. I really don't give a shit about it. It could be something like a Liquid, right? And I'll be pretty happy with that. Summer can AWP if needs be. A couple of my other players, which will be shown later on, can AWP as well. They're not primary AWPers, but I'd rather have a consistent player who has proven history, while Summer has never really lived up to the hype behind him. I feel like it's because he's trying to do too many things at the same time. He's trying to AWP, he's trying to be the in-game leader, he's trying to do too many things and just not clicking for him. But I still feel he's got the chops, he has the understanding how to approach the game, and I'm not really looking at it as him as an AWPer. Man for man, Danking is a better AWP, but I think Summer is a better fit. And obviously, when you see the rest of my lineup, you realize why I can't fit Danking in. I potentially would have brought him in if I could not find my 5th or my 4th player, but I just found better options compared to Danking.
Yeah, it does get a little bit muddy when we start to talk about the riflers. I guess we can move into that right now if you guys are pretty keen to. I don't think that there's too much more to touch on with Danking. We sort of know what he can be, but it's a question of whether or not he's going to be able to actually hit that mark or not. So I suppose we'll wait and see, right? Because he is in Tyloo, and so that's going to give us a really good gauge as to whether or not, myself, Pili, and Nikh are kind of on the right side of the fence, or if maybe Bleh going with someone like Summer is probably a better option, despite the fact that they're obviously still in the same team. We'll get to see how he sort of develops as a player and as an AWPer. Anyway, so let's go and I'm going to do all 3 of these at the same time. So feel free to talk about all 3 because I feel like you can kind of make arguments for and against a lot of these players, and you sort of have to do it in conjunction with the remaining 2 riflers there as well. So we've all got somebody in our roster. That's not a huge surprise, I don't think.
Who?
Yeah.
Sorry.
God, Anyway, Bleh, I know you're a big Somebody fan.
No.
Hater? I don't know. Where do we sit here?
Somebody's like your ex. Like, you're still horny for her, but then you realize how fucking terrible she can be for you, right? Somebody's that. I love when he goes to a certain place, and I'm like, that's genius. And then he does the same thing in the first 10 seconds of a round. And I'm like, why are you pushing long doors as CT on a full buy with 1 minute and 35 seconds on the clock? Is something wrong with you? And that's the problem with Somebody. He lives and dies with a push, right? And I spoke to the manager. I forgot his name. Nikh, what's his name? Of Tyloo.
Jack.
It's a super nice guy. I keep talking to him because he can speak English very, very well. I'm like, so what's up with him? Right? And what happened? You've had coaches and everyone in the past. You had Jonta, you had Peacemaker, and what went wrong, right? And he's like, somebody refuses to listen. He just doesn't listen. He doesn't care if you're Chinese or if you're like a white coach coming in or what. He doesn't give a fuck. He doesn't give a flying.
He just
fuck.
wants to play his game.
His game. And here's the thing: they tried to rein him in, and he just became a complete bot. He just can't play unless he plays his style. So. But I still feel, keeping Bentet aside and potentially Kaze when he's like just popping off, I still feel Somebody is the best player in China. His style is probably the most unique style of individual Counter-Strike you will see on the planet. I mean, he makes Dewey back in his rankest like FPL days, or rank S days, and on ESEA days look very, very reasonable compared to shit he does. And he does it consistently against tier 1 teams at times. So at one point, you got to give it to him. You got to give it to this guy, saying that, you know what you're doing. I'm going to give you a little bit of more of a longer leash. Do what you want to do. And he is going to be the X factor in whatever team he plays on.
Okay, Pili, you're sort of on the same train of thought as Bleh, I know, because we've had many, many discussions in the past about Somebody. But what's your take here? Why is he basically the guy that we've all chosen in our roster, right? If you look, the only 2 players that we have the same this time are the IGL, which is pretty easy to sort of align on, and Somebody.
Yeah, I mean, what can I say about somebody? In the nicest way possible, he's got something fucked up in his brain. Like, honestly, I remember I've casted so many of these games, and legit, I'll watch him on Mirage or Inferno or something like that, and I'll just have like a somebody push tally on CT side.
Pili,
Like,
Pili. Do you remember the one in Jakarta? We were casting the Dust 2 game. And he pushed the B bomb site on Dust 2 as a CT, like 13 rounds out of 15. And both of us are like, what the fuck is he doing? Like,
he plays T side 30 rounds of the map. It doesn't matter. Like, honestly.
W all the way. Yeah.
That is quotable. That's very quotable.
So yeah, look, anyway, the reason why I've gone for him, and I think the most interesting thing to talk about, and the thing that I want to hear from all of you guys is the configuration of the roles that your riflers are going to play in your team. Because the thing is that because Tyloo has been so fucked up for such a long time, I feel like both Somebody and Summer are players that can kind of do a little bit of everything out of it. Like, sometimes you'll see Somebody just like primary AWP on T side on Mirage and just run out mid and start AWPing people through con and stuff like that. You'll see him, primary AWP on CT side in certain positions and kill a bunch of people. He just does what he wants, and I think that's extremely dangerous in a team where you're going to have a dedicated in-game leader like Advent. And we're not going to talk about personalities, but just talking about the style of the team. The reason why I've gone for the players that I've gone for is because I knew that you got to have somebody on your team, and I think it kind of him and the in-game leader will define your whole team, because you have to decide what somebody's going to be doing in your team, and once you decide what he's going to be doing, which is there's only really one right answer, he does whatever the fuck he wants. You have to sort of fit the rest of the team around him, which basically kind of pigeonholes you, I think, into a 1-4, where you basically got somebody doing whatever he wants, wherever he wants. And that's going to make it very hard to fit a lot of other Chinese players who play a lurk style rather than a faster sort of style into your roster, because half the time that's what somebody's going to want to do. He's an aggressive lurker on the T side. He wants to go and fight in certain areas like B apartments on Mirage, 15 rounds in a row. It doesn't matter if you're going A, you're going for a default for mid control. This guy's like lurking in a smoke that he's thrown in B apps and trying to kill the B anchor and sell it fake for no reason kind of thing. So I think the whole idea behind my roster is you've got Attacker doing what he always does on Tyloo, which is a lot of the time on T side being pretty solid and running out and trying to create aggro and all that kind of stuff. Advent's like my superstar support player, in-game leader, big brain, and Summer's going to do a little bit of everything. So that's sort of the hypothesis behind my team.
I think that's a really interesting point as well. And now I'm sort of rethinking, like, do I even want to have Advent and Somebody in the same team, right? Like, again, we talked about like personalities and whatever, notwithstanding, but just thinking about it from like the standpoint of, okay, I'm Advent, I'm trying to get these players to do what I want, and then Somebody's just kind of like, fuck you, I'm doing what I want. Is that not going to cause problems in the roster?
The thing is, though, that like every team has somebody like that. Somebody, but every team has a player like that where they just do whatever they want. For the most part, and it's just about the degree of which you let that player have a little bit of free reign. So I think you're sort of hard committing to that. I think in real life, this would never fucking work. Like, I honestly think this would not work.
Okay, so Nikh, then you've not had much of an input so far on the Somebody discussion. Are you rethinking things here? Are the cogs turning in your head? Because I see you looking pretty pensive.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think Pili did bring up a good point about this whole, like, you brought up a good point about what Pili said and like how it made you rethink it, that Advent brings that structure, and like what you're trying to do with bringing a player like Advent in is to give this super team like some sort of direction, which a lot of like the Chinese teams right now are lacking. But then you've got this wildcard player, Somebody, right? And I think it goes to the point about, like, in CS you talk about these different roles, like you have the standard roles of an AWPer, an IGL, a support player, an entry fragger, a rifler. But like, I think there is a distinct separate role, which is the wild card, right? Which is the guy like Somebody that can do anything and everything, and also just plays his own style, doesn't really fit or conform into any one type of structure. And you're right that a lot of teams have this one player, but it tends to be that player already is defined by his primary role, aka he's an AWPer, but he's a more free playing AWPer, right? He's just a type of AWPer that does things, will move around the map and rotate and stuff like that. But or you have a rifler who's, less of a passive lurker and more of a rotating lurker and will just come and go depending on where the team needs him. But like somebody really is that true like Uno wildcard, like it can be used for anything and it's unpredictable and you don't know what he's going to do. So that's the argument for somebody, really, in my opinion, is that he really just, he's one of the few players probably in the world, but definitely in Asia, that you just can't define him. So it's fitting that his name is somebody, right?
Yeah, he's like one of those weird players where you just almost can't not have him on your roster. It seems like weird to sort of be like, okay, well, he kind of fucks up the roster, but he's also so good that he's kind of the X factor, and you can't not have him. So
yeah, I mean, it's hard to imagine a top Chinese team without him on it,
exactly.
right? Yeah.
Same for the likes of Summer and Attacker, though, and yet at least for myself, I don't have Summer. I don't have Attacker. You don't have Summer or Attacker. So let's start talking about those two. There's no necessary reason why I've gone for these guys straight into it over the likes of Zhoking or JamYoung or whatever. But let's talk about Summer and Attacker. I guess, Bleh, bring you back into this conversation. You've got Summer. You've obviously got him as your AWPer. So we've sort of touched on that a little bit, and we know the reasons why you've got him as your AWPer. But you've also got Attacker in here as well. And was that sort of like a thing where you were like, okay, well, I want to keep the core of the Tyloo roster together, or are they just individually the best players that you think can fit into a Chinese roster, regardless of prehistory or anything like that?
I think it's a bit of both and a little bit of extra. Firstly, I want to maintain a core. I think the core as a whole can definitely work. Secondly, Attacker, he has been neutered in Tyloo. Now, many people say Attacker's really fallen off, and yes, he has. But so has Freeman. But remember when both of them were really good? That was with fucking Advent, right? Advent comes into the picture, I feel like Attacker's going to get activated again. You still see moments of brilliance. He knows how to approach the game. He is not as wild as somebody, right? Somebody's a guy who can be the X factor, can be a sight holder or whatever. But then if you have someone like Attacker and Summer and JamYoung there, it could really, really be a solid core. Someone who's going to listen to Advent, and that's what I really want to keep here. And I feel the duo of Attacker, JamYoung, and then of course the aggro lurk of somebody, it can really work out. They're all very, very sharp. Attacker has the chops, and and under Advent, I feel like this actually might work. And this is a legit, I know this is kind of like a hypothesis, it's kind of like a team we're just trying to pull out from the air and see if it works, like how we did for the English speaking thing. But this Chinese lineup, at least mine, I really believe can work. I think this could be the lineup that actually breaks out and does damage internationally. And for that, you need someone like Attacker.
Okay, Pili, you've got Attacker on your roster as well. So consider this the final words for Attacker then before we start talking about some of the other guys that we've got listed in our rosters.
It's been on a lot of the teams from China, different mixes. I mean, we talked about that KU roster, but Tyloo as well. He's been overseas maybe the most times out of anybody, or close to. He's definitely up there. So he's got a hell of a lot of experience. I remember playing with a Malaysian guy on my team a couple of years ago called PC Kid, who you guys might know from Frostfire. And I remember asking him, who do you reckon's got the best aim in Asia? And he goes, Attacker's like an aimbot in pugs, and he's got this weird sense or something, like he plays with mouse excel or some shit, where he's just snapping onto everyone's head, and it's pretty retarded. You can't play against it. And that's always stuck in my mind. But I just think he's got a hell of a lot of experience, and I think that he's going to be a really good option to be like an entry fragger and run in and just do what's needed for the team and hit some pretty clean shots and create space for the unlimited amounts of players in China that can seem to have impact in the mid to late round and get things done. So that's why I definitely want him in the roster. And also he's just very familiar with all the other players as well.
Yeah, and I would say, looking at my roster, Attacker would be like the sixth man. And for me, it was a question of okay, is it Summer or Attacker, or is it JamYoung or Summer or Attacker? You know what I mean? I could have had any combination of those three, and this is why I sort of say it's more of an optimism roster, right? I've put JamYoung in because he's sort of that new talent, that new blood that comes into the Chinese region in the last sort of 6 months or so, and we've all been pretty impressed by. So I've gone with Danking, I've gone with JamYoung, two relative unknowns, I'll say, in comparison to the likes of somebody, Summer, and Attacker. And in reality, I could put Attacker in my roster instead of Summer, and I think it wouldn't make too much of a difference. But Bleh, you've got JamYoung in your roster as well. So are you sort of on the same train of thought as me? Is he that unknown quantity that could elevate Chinese CS to the next level?
I don't think he's as unknown as Danking, if you ask me, right? He's been filling in for Freeman, and when he got picked up, I was like, yeah, there's no way like he's going to be able to fill those shoes because Freeman was a beast under Advent. I think it's credit to both Advent and JamYoung as to how well he's really come out from the pugging style. And I know a lot of the Chinese players might be really good at pugging, but they don't really fit well into a team. Danking being a very good example, right? But JamYoung's really impressed me. I think he can be picked up. I think it's great that his first main team was with someone like Advent, so he doesn't get used to the typical puggy style that most Asian teams go with, right? So he's definitely someone I want to have in his team. He's young as well. I think he still has a way to go, and he still has a potential peak ahead of him. He's the future star of the team. He's a young gun. He's my Stewie when he joined, whatever team he joined initially, right? He's the potential. The potential of the team kind of like relies on his player. Also, he's been playing with Advent for a while, and if I'm going to get Advent, I want to get him someone he's been playing with for a while. In bringing into this new roster, because I can't get Kaze. Almond is too inconsistent, and Zhoking is
same
Zhoking. Yeah. So I really can't get those three. So yeah, it just makes sense to me logically to get JamYoung on here.
Okay, I want to talk about Zhoking, but I want to give one more question to you, Pili, before we start talking about Nick's crazy fucking rifle setup here. I know you're a big fan of JamYoung, right? And I sort of questioned, like, why immediately when I saw your roster, I was like, why isn't JamYoung in your roster? Because I thought this would be a shoo-in for you to put in your roster. So what's your reasoning for not having JamYoung?
Yeah, so JamYoung's a really sick player. He's super young. From the first game, I watched some of his first games on Vici, at least in the leagues that we got to see on HLTV and stuff. And I think he was replacing like that Frankie 19 guy or whatever. And I was just like, wow. Vici was looking okay with this Frankie guy, but this JamYoung guy, complete unknown, literally no games on HLTV, he's probably going to be shit. And I watched him play, and he's just like young, he's smart. He's like your in-game leader's wet dream because he goes and he takes map control so consistently. Like he'll go and take A apartments on Inferno on T side like the same way every time. He's got the protocols all in line. He will like lurk through, and he knows how to read the rotations of the other team and make correct decisions a high percentage of the time when he hasn't got very much experience, which is like ridiculous for someone that young. He looks like a much older player that's like wise beyond his years. The problem is that I genuinely don't think that you can put JamYoung and somebody on the same team unless you're going to have unless you're going to have JamYoung play a more supportive role, or you're going to have somebody as more of an entry kind of player, which we know you can't force somebody to do something like that. He's not going to play well, or he's not going to listen to you.
Okay, so wait, before you go too far down this rabbit hole, here's my question then, and it's in relation obviously to 100 Thieves, right? When you see JKS and Liaz on the same team, for example, and everyone's like, okay, they play the exact same role, and yet Liaz now has come into that roster and sort of changed his playstyle. Is that not something that you see JamYoung being able to do?
Yeah, so he could, but he would basically be Liaz, right? And that's not really a fair comparison because those two players are a lot more similar than JamYoung and somebody are. Somebody is like this ridiculously crazy aggressive lurker who's just going to W into the other team and go look for picks and be hyper aggressive, put pressure on the other team, whereas JamYoung is very reserved. Like he's going to take the high percentage fights. He's not going to do anything too crazy. He's just going to go through the protocols and take that map control for you pretty consistently, which is going to be good for someone like Advent, in my opinion. But at the end of the day, he would probably end up being more like a Liaz. He would become a little bit more inconsistent probably. He'd probably be shoved into some of the bitch roles, and I don't know how that would necessarily go. Maybe it would be fine, but at the same time, why would you have a rookie doing that as opposed to somebody who's got a little bit more experience like Summer, unless he's AWPer like Bleh has?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the argument then is that potentially JamYoung could be better in the long term, but that's. I guess in the argument for you would be that there's a high degree of risk in a strategy like that. You don't know necessarily, so you've more or less stuck with what you know. Whereas for someone like me, I don't know. I've got faith in JamYoung. We'll see, I guess, how things go in the future for him as an individual. But this is where things start to get a little bit interesting. Nick, you're the sort of the odd man out here, right? I think it's fair. We can make an argument for JamYoung. We can make an argument for Summer Attacker, whatever. But Zhoking and Slowly, you're sort of the odd man out here. So talk me through these choices.
Yeah, what the fuck, Nikh?
And then
Your team sucks.
and then I'm going to give Pili and Bleh
Fine,
the
I'll take
opportunity.
that. But
to
I have
shit
my
on you.
reasons.
So
All right.
the floor is yours. I'm going to mute Pili and Bleh if they don't shut up. It's like a
Well, firstly, I think it wouldn't have
presidential
been
debate.
as fun if I just came out with like a JamYoung and attacker like all of you, or like a summer. So I knew going into this when you sent me the message, first of all, just a few days ago. So I didn't have a lot of time to put this together. I've been really busy and the time pressure got to me. So I just kind of like, I was like, Advent, Dan King, somebody, yep, that core has to be there. And then who's the last two? Fuck. I just like threw in these two names, right? But it kind of worked. So here we are. Yeah, I agree with you. Zhoking is not the best player. There have been times where he's impressed me. There have been like individual plays, maybe on like individual games where I was like, whoa, Zhoking went off. But like for the most part, his decision making, his plays are just not impressive. And he's just kind of been a player it's like he's had the benefit of being in the top teams in China for the longest time. So I guess he rarely gets the cut or anything because players or orgs just sort of rely on him having that experience and professionalism. And I think he is a very professional player. Like, when you meet him, he holds himself, he carries himself well. He's not like the other Chinese players that cause drama or anything like that. So in some ways, maybe that's why he's just stuck around, right? Because he's one of those like easily malleable players and he just listens. He's a good boy type of guy, which also probably plays against him in game, right? Because he does kind of he'll play it safe and sometimes too safe, and it's just like the stupidest thing you could do. And then sometimes he'll just do something stupid, like he'll try to be like somebody and do something cool, but it doesn't work out. There's no flair like somebody has. So I'll take it from you guys that Zhoking doesn't deserve to be on this roster. It was more of just like a crapshoot in the dark. The main thing here for me though was that I didn't want attacker and summer on my roster. I just felt that it was too obvious of a choice, and they've just been like on the top two teams in China for the longest time. But yet, if you think about it, like they've had so many chances, man. They've gone to pretty much every event, them too, as a pair, whether it was with Tyloo, and then that one period where they were VG Flash and they represented Asia with VG Flash, they went there, and it was like this new hope, like, oh yes, finally Tyloo is not the one representing Asia. It's this new VG Flash. Like, what are they gonna do? Is Advent gonna bring them to the next level? DD and Mo were the problem. Like, attacker and summer are the best that we have. And what did they do? They didn't do jack shit. So it's like enough. Like they've had their chance for the last like 5 or 6 years in Asian CS. Let's bring in new people, let's bring in new blood. And I agree that JamYoung is one of those players. Like, he's definitely impressed me. He's only been on the like, he's only been playing competitive CS for like 2, maximum 3 years. And out of that, he's already been thrown into the top tier of the Chinese scene with Vici and being led by someone like Advent. And it's showing, right? And you can tell that his style and his sort of like understanding of the game is coming from someone a lot more experienced than him, because Advent is basically mentoring him on that team. So it's an unknown factor, I think. Like, if someone like JamYoung was to play with players like Tyloo, would he be the star there, right? Would he be popping off? And would somebody would still continue to be that like wildcard player? You can't control him, but maybe JamYoung would have some of that element, maybe, and he is, correct me if I'm wrong, he's the main AWPer on Vici right now, JamYoung.
No, Kaze.
Yeah, obviously Kaze. But I've seen JamYoung AWP as well, so he can pick up the AWP and he's pretty decent at it. So there's an option there for him to be like, another malleable player that they can use, right? Slowly was just like a default to like force myself to bring in a new young player who may not be the best, but he is young, right? I think he's only 19 or 20, if I'm not wrong.
Sure.
Yeah. So, that's really it for me. I mean, definitely the core there of Advent, Danking, and somebody will be the focus of this team, and then the other two are just sort of riflers that you can just like throw around and use them for entry and getting your picks early into the game.
Okay, so the way that I looked at my team was like that optimistic, maybe Danking, maybe JamYoung can be like the next big stars within China. I feel like the way that you've looked at your team is the pessimistic team. It's like, I don't want attacker and summer because they have had so many opportunities and haven't done anything with it. So it seems like two different schools of thought. Anyway, it's time to release the hounds here. I know Pili and Bleh have been itching for a chance to have their input on Zhoking and Slowly. So I'll give this one first to you, Bleh, because I look at the roster and I say, okay, fair enough. I can kind of see why you would have Zhoking on the roster. You know, he's been in one of the top 2 teams in China for as long as I've been casting Counter-Strike. He's been there for forever, basically. So he's definitely within the top 10 or something like that. He's within the discussion, right? So why is it so abhorrent maybe to you, Bleh, to see Zhoking in this roster?
Because he's not even the best in-game. He's not even the best entry fragger. He's sharp. He has his moments. The good thing is he's the good boy, right? He's the guy. He's the attack dog, which is perfect for Advent. But the thing is, you can get other dogs who can do other things apart from just bite people. You know how to like sit and roll over and fetch a newspaper and whatnot. You want that. You want options as the in-game leader. I think that's very important. Zhoking's more like Zhoking. Hold a sight. Oh, did it ask me to just push in right now? Yes, I shall. And just rushes in and go. No. Right? Especially when you're playing that long. When you've been playing for fucking like since the beginning of CS:GO, you need to grow as a player, and he hasn't. He's still there. He's still up there, but I feel almost any other option is better than Zhoking right now when it comes to just being an aggro player, right?
So it seems like you've got that same train of thought about Zhoking as what Nikh has got about Summer and Attacker.
No, so the thing with Summer Attacker is I still feel they are more they have more chops than Zhoking. They can do more things, and I think they're a little bit more cerebral, which sounds weird coming from me. That but compared to Zhoking, almost anyone is. I think Zhoking can still work in other teams, but this is my Chinese super team. I would not have Zhoking there. And also when it comes to Attacker and Summer, I agree with Nikh. They've been playing internationally so many times, but I still feel like Nikh says, given opportunity to other players. What have other players done? They're not even able to beat Tyloo. They're not even able to beat a team that's not even that good according to us, right? So if you can't even beat Tyloo, if you can't beat the core of somebody and Summer and Attacker, do you deserve to go out there? No, you don't. I'm sorry. Beat them, qualify, go out there, have a deep run, or like potentially reach a playoffs in the May. Fuck the playoffs, man. Just try to get out of the fucking group stage. You can do that. You impress me. Then absolutely, I agree. Summer Attacker haven't achieved shit, but so far, they and some of the guys from Vici are the only players from Asia who've actually come close to toppling a few top tier teams, or even like actually doing that in the case of Tyloo. So we can say whatever we want about them not having achieved much, but I don't really put faith in anyone else in China or Asia, doing anything close to what these guys have done.
All right, Pili, you've been nodding along a little bit here. So what's your take on Zhoking and Slowly? Is it as aggressive as Bleh's?
Look, all I'm going to say about Zhoking is the same clip comes to mind every single time, and Bleh was casting this game with me.
I know exactly
Zhoking. He's sitting in the corner on overpass next to the truck against a full Glock eco against MVP PK and ESL Pro League. He's got an M4A4. All he needs to do is just hit some unarmored opponents, and he sprays this full 30 bullet clip, and he doesn't land a single bullet on players running right in front of his crosshair.
Elfish, could you please kind of like overlay that clip like a GIF or something on top of this video?
I'll try and find it. I'll see if I can find it.
Oh, I feel like I can find it.
Just make that the intro.
Yes, that might be what I'll do.
That so people know what we're talking about.
It's not hyperbole. It is not hyperbole. I've seen it. I lost my shit. Pili was just holding me. Like, it's all right, Bleh. We have viewers for later.
Bleh was basically on the floor. Like we didn't even cast around. Like it was just absolutely comical, because the thing was, it wasn't like one of those rounds that didn't mean anything. I think it was like 13-13 or 13-14 or something. Right, and MVP had literally no chance to win that game. They were economically fucked. They were like hard reset. They were just trying to run in there with Glocks to get the bomb down so they could have an extra flashbang on top of their UMP in the next round, to fucking lose with anyway. And I'm pretty sure that he just let them run into the side.
They didn't even see him, Pili. They were turned away.
I think they ran into CT spawn or something. Anyway, you'll see the clip. Hopefully Jordan can pick it up. If you can't, go out there, look for it yourself. It's
worst case scenario, we'll put a link in the description or something like that. You'll be able to find it.
So look, ever since that moment, Zhoking's been in the bin for me. Even though I remember his
that kind of broke it.
Get out of here.
Yeah. But you know, he definitely has his moments, right? He definitely has his 30 bomb games every one in like 10 or so, which is kind of the problem. If you got 100% out of Zhoking all the time, I would put him on my Chinese super team. His skill ceiling's ridiculous. He has some of the best like raw mechanical aim in CS, I think, at least in the Asian region. And obviously he's quite good in a system. He's been in Vici for a very, very long time. It means he must be a really good team player. So he's definitely one of the top players in China, that's for sure. But I just think he's just way too inconsistent. As for what Nikh said about Summer and Attacker, completely agree. He literally hit the nail on the head. I think one of the worst things that's happened to the Chinese scene is just that Tyloo's managed to win a lot of very, very close games when their roster was like all over the fucking place. And every single time, like even that time in Pro League, I remember where they beat MVP PK because Summer got like an ace with an AWP on the B site when they shouldn't have won that game. There's been so many egregious games where Tyloo has just pushed it across the line when their rosters like, you know, what the fuck's happening with it, or then their form's kind of average, but they still manage to win all these domestic games. And I think Summer and Attacker are very, very inconsistent players, and I think that they've gone through multiple role crises. So I honestly agree with Nikh. I thought about not having Summer and Attacker in my team, and I probably would have picked Slowly and JamYoung if I was going to have it like that. But for the same reason as I stated earlier, I think that you would probably have to cut the large majority of the Tyloo players and maybe even think about somebody if you're going to put a team together like that, or someone's going to have to hugely change their role, or maybe you'd have to have someone like Slowly come in and just fill one of the gaps that's been left by having all these kind of players that fill some of the similar roles together in the same team.
Okay, so that was a lot of talking about Zhoking. What's your thoughts on Slowly as well?
Yeah, well, it's just what I said. I think Slowly is someone I probably would have put in my team if I didn't have some of these Tyloo players. You know, I think it would be good to give some of those guys a shot, and that's what the whole ramble about Tyloo winning a lot of these close games was about. Really, it's about the fact that they have a lot of veteran Chinese players that have won a lot of these games time and time again. If they'd lost and some of these smaller talents had actually been able to break through, if eHome had been able to upset them a couple of extra times, or maybe Tyloo had broken apart instead of continually replacing people on their roster and changing things, or picked up some of these players a lot earlier, I think that a lot of these players that are a little bit younger in the Chinese scene would be a lot better, and you'd be having a couple of names that you'd be talking about maybe from that eHome roster or some of the other rosters that would be a lot better at this point in time if Tyloo wasn't just on top all the time.
Well, hopefully that's what the players like Danking and JamYoung will develop into in the next year or so. We've pretty much gone through the whole discussion about our rosters. So does anyone have any closing thoughts, or, you know, Nikh, do you want to sort of defend yourself once again, or you don't want to engage in?
Well,
that
I don't. The thing is, I take it. I take all the criticism of my lineup like right up the arse, right? So it's just like
fucking hell.
I fucking hell, mate. I'll take it. I get it, and I think Pili said the right thing. It's that you do want to give these young guys a try, and for the longest time, China has they've just sort of circulated within like the top 3 in terms of players. Like, you know, Attacker and Summer have gone Vici Flash, Tyloo like a couple of times already, right? It's like this is the time to kind of like let the scene open up and figure out where they can get players from feeder teams. Like eHome is becoming like this new feeder team in a way. And you've got like that Eclipse, R-Stars, 5-Power crew that was a feeder team as well. And you've got a lot of,
Even
some
Invictus
players
as
out.
well.
Right, exactly. Like Viva, he's a pretty up and coming. He's like the main AWPer for Invictus. And he's a pretty decent player. Like, I don't think we've been able to see enough of him on like a high level, but he was on that CyberZen roster, right? That made it to the Asia Minor last year to Katowice. So, and they were only together for such a short time, and they managed to upset like some of the better teams, so to speak, better teams in China and get that spot, right? So I think it's time for China to like stop circulating the same players, and basically that's why I defend on that whole like not including Summer and Attacker. But the question is, now it's like there's so many players to choose from. I mean, there are just so many players in China that it's really hard to identify like which 5 would really gel and mix well together.
Okay, so what if it wasn't 5? What if it was 6, right? We did this in the last episode. If you had... This is like the wild card. You can't choose someone else, like someone from someone else's roster. So anyone that's on the screen right now, not an option. If you had to choose one more player to potentially be in your team, who would it be? And this is for you, Nikh, to start things off again.
So are we allowed to choose it and then like add a coach or something?
I mean, I guess so. Like, we did talk about coaches in the last episode a little bit. I thought that we wouldn't really touch too much on the coaches here for China. But if you want to go for that, then go for that.
Yeah, I'll throw a spanner in the works. I'll say that I would put Xiao Saga as IGL because he has a lot of experience and he's done a pretty decent job. Like, after Schwaderpai left the 5-power crew, Xiao Saga sort of took off, and he kind of like brought that R-Stars, like the Viva and everything, and now they've just kind of gone to Invictus now, right? So I would put Xiao Saga as the IGL and move Advent into the coach, and I would think that, and then remove Zhoking, and put in JamYoung instead. And then you have like this solid mix of new blood. You've got Advent with the experienced coaching, and you got Xiao Saga. He's 30 years old, by the way, but he's still, he's not popping off, but he still holds his own. Yeah. So like, and he does have like some good IGL ability. I wouldn't say he's as cerebral as someone like Advent, but then Advent would be your coach. So that would be my 6-man there.
Okay, let's go back to front then, Bleh. This is your chance. You've obviously got a pretty interesting face going on right now, so it seems like Nick's given you something to think about.
I'm surprised someone brought up Karsa. 6-man, huh?
I mean, we talked about Karsa a little bit in the discussion about the IGLs.
I'd put Karsa as a coach, not as a 6-man. I mean, I don't think he's gonna add any like extra firepower to the team. I think he's someone who he does a lot of prep work. He's the sort of guy who does a lot of the anti-stratting and whatnot, and Advent's the guy who actually takes reins in the server, right? So I feel like together that'd be a good mix. Xiao Saga, how would I pronounce his name? I don't know. I mean, I agree with Nikh that he's mature. He's not a stupid player. He's decent, but on a super team, the best of the best in the region, I don't think he really has a spot, if you ask me, to be very honest, right? And there are a lot of names out there like that. Like, I think of players like let's see, you have like Bottle. Like, he was a player who's been around for quite a while, right? But hasn't really done much. You have Viva, and then one player who has sorely disappointed me, like a lot, and he would have been my AWPer choice, and I would have picked him over Summer if he hadn't completely shit the bed. And I also heard that he really doesn't fit in well with the team. Is our good old AE or I?
Oh yeah, AE, yeah.
I remember casting quite a few games when he just came out, and he impressed me. He was this wild AWPer, and I'm like, if he reins in some of his tendencies, he could be insane. He was not as consistent as, let's say, a Kaze, but my lord, he was even more explosive than Kaze. It was super fun to watch. But I do believe he did try out for Tyloo, and our guy Jax from Tyloo, the manager, was like, yeah, it didn't fit in. He's not ready for that level. That's what he said. Obviously, I'm going to take his word at face value because Tyloo do know what they're doing. End of the day, sure, they might not have achieved what we want them to achieve, but they're still a top 2 team in entirety of Asia, and have been consistently a top 2 team or even a top 1 team for the longest time now, about 4 years in running, right? So they know what they're talking about. So I think AE is one of the biggest disappointments for me, because if he had stood up, he would be the Asian AWPer that I would pick. But then you have Danking as well. But AE is a guy who, in my opinion, has actually played more at a higher level. He's shown what he could do against the likes of Vici and Tyloo. And a couple of games, man, he made Tyloo sweat. So it's kind of unfortunate he fell off. Also, he's not even playing anymore. I don't think he's even on any...
Yeah, I'm not even sure what he's up to. I think he
Which is
plays,
sad.
But...
The drop was massive, right? It was quite impressive for a while back. But yeah, apart from that, I really can't think of any, man. Yeah, I guess Danking is there somewhere. Somewhere's floating around for me. If he doesn't shit the bed in this upcoming Road to Rio thing, I would want to revisit my lineup, and I'd potentially replace Summer with him. Honestly speaking, I remember picking Summer. I was like, okay, who else do I put? But it's no one else. It's literally no one else.
Potentially do another China team later on down the track where we revisit this discussion, but Pili, you've had a little bit of time to think here, right? So you must have a banger for us.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly like Nick's idea of putting Advent as a coach and Xiao Sage as the in-game leader. I think that wouldn't be too bad of a shout. I thought about Bottle, but I think it's another one of these just clips when you just been a player for forever. And my most egregious example of Bottle is I remember him playing on the CyberZen team, and it's Inferno CT side, and you got one bloke. He's the dig player. You've got the carpets player. He's hiding in pit. It's about 30-ish seconds on the clock. And then you've also got the jungle player playing on that nifty box on the site. He's given up jungle. Where's Bottle? Surely he's on the site, right? He's a dig player. He's on like cold zero box or something like that. He is under porch with a full belt of utility with 30 seconds on the clock, trying to frag the other team as they come up bracket. Hasn't thrown a single piece of util. 30 seconds to go. Highest percentage is you just chuck the util on dig and you probably just win the round like 9 times out of 10. And he just tries to take a duel from porch when his entire team's playing passive and gets one beat and then they lose the round. So I feel like Bottle's a bit of a bonehead. He's got some ridiculous aim, like ridiculous talent, but
Bottlehead.
He's a bit of a bottlehead, yeah. The player that I'd probably put in, I kind of like Flying from Invictus, to be honest. That old Invictus roster. I'd probably put him instead of Attacker. I really like to watch Flying on when he was playing on Invictus and playing in that what was it? It was a qualifier that we casted. I think I casted it with Mac Jordan from that downstairs studio.
It would have been one of the Katowice quals or one of the IEM qualifiers. I don't know what one.
It was that 2 Russian, 3 Chinese roster.
I know the team.
Flying was
with Killmatic and stuff.
Sick.
Yeah.
No, it was Koshak and Vadim.
Yep, Koshak and Vadim.
Oh, okay,
And then,
Vadim, that's right.
X-Pro and
Yeah.
Flying. And Flying was actually pretty legit in that roster. Like, I remember he had like a 90 frags across the best of 3 against some of those like really good like top Asian teams. So yeah, he really impressed me, even though they went to the LAN and got absolutely fisted.
True. All right. Well, for me, mine was Viva, but I sort of think like, okay, he probably doesn't really fit into a dream team, a Chinese dream team, or anything like that. He's another one of those guys that, like, 20 years old or whatever. We'll see how he goes over the next couple of years, but it may be another instance of a player that fades into obscurity. So I didn't really have a good option for this because the caveat there was they couldn't be in someone else's team, whereas obviously my 6th would be Attacker if I had to change someone. But that's more or less the end of the discussion about the teams. We'll go back to our normal lovely graphic here and start talking about what is our final segment for the show. It's not going to be a long one today.
I actually want to just touch upon one quick thing before we move on.
Sure.
I find it a little sad that when we spoke about like the English-speaking super team in Asia, we had a lot more room for discussion and more varied lineups, right? And when it comes to China, I mean, everyone talks about China being like, because they have Tyloo and Vici being like the main hub for professional Counter-Strike in Asia. But look at our lineups. Barely a difference. I think it was only Nick's picks, which is Zhoking and Stoli, which all of us are like, oh, whoa, what the fuck, Nikh, right? But even then, Nick acknowledges why he wanted those 2 in and not, Attacker and Summer. And it just goes to show there is literally no one to pick in China right now. And that's, I think, a very sad state of affairs, considering CSGO as it's at its highest popularity. And if I'm not mistaken, the number of people playing in China right now has been more than ever before. Yet there is a lack of players, and that's just sad.
I don't know about you guys, but I sort of feel like there's almost less opportunities for the teams in China outside of Tyloo and Vici than there is for the teams within SEA. Like, I very frequently see SEA teams making it to these sort of semi-international events or these like almost decent events. Whereas for you look at the Chinese teams, when was the last time you saw a Chinese team that wasn't Tyloo Flash or Vici Flash, Vici Flash or Tyloo going to an international competition? I can't really remember that. Maybe like a WESG or something like that, which in reality, we're not going to talk too much about because those events are kind of interesting at the best of times. So I almost feel like there's a better opportunity for individuals to kind of develop within the SEA region than there is within China, unless you get onto Vici or Tyloo. So that might be why
I would agree.
Don't have much variety there, because when you look at it, all the players that we've got are pretty much on Vici and Tyloo. Anyway.
Yeah, and I mean, you can see that as well from like the Chinese orgs bringing in SEA players, right, to fill in that gap now. It's like, that's exactly, you hit the nail on the head. Like the SEA players, like, next step to get out into the best in Asia is to join a Chinese org, right? I mean, any of the players here you'd ask, like, if given the opportunity to join like a Tyloo or a Vici or that level, would jump on it?
A little bit like, you know, if there was, if 100 Thieves was still playing in Australia and New Zealand, and like no one else ever got any other opportunities, and no one new got brought into that 100 Thieves roster, it was always just the old guard, you know, like the old Vox and Immunity guys just cycling through the best team in ANZ, and no one sort of developed. That's sort of what I would feel like it would be. Anyway, that might be a discussion that we can have later on down the track in a more sort of in-depth sense. I do want to jump into this discussion about the Weibo Cup, and maybe this sort of solves some of the issues, I guess. I don't know. For anyone that doesn't know, there's a great article that was put out by CSGO to Asia. I don't know who's got anything to do with that company, but yeah, I read the article and I thought it was a pretty good one, so you should check that out. I'll put a link to it in the description.
Appreciate it.
For you. But yeah, Nikh, you know, you've obviously got a bit of info on this, I'm sure. It seems like a pretty good shout, right, for the Asian region, which doesn't necessarily get I would say, like, you know, you see a lot of the domestic Chinese tournaments, and you do see a lot of tournaments that focus on the SEA region as well, but you never really see much of a crossover. So for anyone that doesn't know what we're talking about here and is too lazy to read the article, it's a 320,000 yuan tournament, which is roughly $45,000 US. Not too bad. 16 teams across all of Asia, and obviously China being a large portion of that. But you've got pretty much all of the top teams from Asia. There's obviously Tyloo Vici, you've got Beyond and Lucid and Sigma, so the best teams in Thailand. Tiger Marzlai D13, the best teams in Mongolia. BTRG and Huatzai are there as well to sort of represent the more SEA-esque teams. And then there's like a shit ton of all the like tier 2 or tier 3 Chinese teams as well.
Chinese teams,
yeah, so it seems like a pretty good mix.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's something that we needed as well. We were just like some of your earlier episodes you were talking about, right? Like Asia is in the worst state, and here we are just a few weeks later. And there's actually, I mean, you'll see this coming week, we got the Asia Road to Rio. We've got this like Lenovo Rise of Legion tournament. It's only a small $1,000 tournament, but 200 and something teams signed up for that, right? So it's going to be, it was supposed to be just a 3-day, like small 32 team tournament. It ended up being like this week-long affair. So we'll be releasing an article about info about that next week. And then you have this Weibo Cup, and to be honest, like I don't know enough about it. The news literally came out like a few days ago, like 4 or 5 days ago. We just got the info about it, and it was posted on Wikipedia. So we dug a little bit deeper So all I know about it is that like it's organized by Weibo. That's the prize pool, and the teams it's all invited, and the format essentially. But I don't know anything else about who's actually organizing it. Is it an in-house Weibo team, or I mean, surely they've outsourced it to somebody, but I don't know anything else about it from other than what you see in the article.
Going from June 2nd to 7th as well, so it just sort of seems like it's going to be one of those almost like the DreamHack events where it takes place over the course of a week, and all the teams just play that for the week, and we get like, in the case of like what we'd call an ODC, but I would say this is like a weekly cup in a way, but it's $45,000 to
exactly. It's not small by any means, right?
It's 16 teams was format in like 4 days.
5 days, I think.
5 days.
5 days, yeah.
It's very tight. All right.
What do you think about
it's
this?
Tight.
I think it's pretty good. A lot of Chinese teams in there for sure. I mean, it's a Chinese organizer, so not too surprised by that one. Wouldn't have minded to see Nikh's team thrown in there, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, we got shafted.
That's the big issue that I have, and there's probably 1 or 2 other names that I would probably throw into there as well. The thing is, like, I almost feel like half the time I don't get excited about these Chinese tourneys, because I feel like even though there's a lot of like opportunities in China and there's a lot of people putting stuff on, like it's almost like the organizers aren't really doing it justice. Like it doesn't get the coverage it needs, or there's always some kind of an issue with a lot of tournaments like this. So I tend not to get as excited for them as I would if you told me ESL was going to be running a competition with all these teams. That's the big problem that I have with it. But I think any opportunity for these players to get themselves hands on some cash and some more practice and some more, experience and all that kind of stuff, you can't really complain about that.
Yeah, I think looking at this, it really reminds me of something similar to what Extremesland does, or Zhao Bengting does for Extremesland, which obviously is a LAN in China. Who knows if that's going to be happening this year based on how things are going at the moment. But like I kind of, in the past, have looked at Extremesland and thought, there's just not, there's sometimes bad coverage or bad quality coverage or something like that. A lot of the time we've been doing it from a clean feed from Australia for the grand finals of that. And, obviously what they were able to do last year with having the English talent at the venue as well was, I thought, a big step up for Extremesland. So this is kind of tying into what Pili is sort of saying, is like, I think Extremesland's kind of gone from like almost a tier 2 Chinese event in the past into sort of filling that hole that Asus ROG sort of left, where they had that big tournament and they had it as a LAN finals and they had good English coverage. Admittedly, there was some issues with the English coverage last year, but at least it's a step forward to be able to bring those us, I suppose, to China, I guess. Let's not beat around the bush. Bleh, you've been a little bit pensive here. Do you see this really making much of a difference, or is this like kind of one of those things where we'll be like so excited about it and then we're going to just, it's going to be and gone? There might not even be English coverage for this. Like, we don't know yet if there is. And I think if there is no English coverage, like, great, yeah, it's good for China, but no one else is going to give a fuck.
I don't think anyone's going to give a fuck, I'll be honest about this. First, it's online. And I think the only reason people are giving a shit because it's by Weibo. There
the money.
A fuck ton. The money's not bad, but here's the thing: there are like a number of Chinese events that happened. Like, I can't name any of them because I really can't be asked. But there are a lot of events which happen. If you look at Wikipedia, which is happening in China consistently, and has been happening for a while. It's just that HLTV doesn't cover it because of obvious reasons, right? Apart from that, a lot of events happen, and it might not have the price pool they have, which is like close to 50,000 USD, which is quite chunky for an online event. But if you look at the number of events that happen and you combine all the price pool up, that's quite a lot of money. I think there's a very famous stat that Tyloo is one of the highest earning teams in Counter-Strike Global Offensive, mainly by winning all these events, right? But not many people hear about it. And the only reason I feel people are like hyping this up a little bit is firstly because CSGO to Asia wrote about it, number one. Number two, it's by Weibo, who everyone knows, or at least we know, is one of the biggest, it is the biggest social media platform in Asia and in China especially. And by the way, I just found out it's being hosted by 5E-Win, by the way.
Oh yeah, that's on the
okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so it's another 5E-Win tournament. I mean, nothing against them. I'm just saying nothing too spectacular. Sure, you have the usual 8 Chinese teams, of which only 2 are actually decent. Then you have relevant, and then you have a few Southeast Asian teams, the usual picks. Nothing too crazy. It's just another road to Rio with more irrelevant teams. Doesn't really make a difference to me, and I don't think it's even going to be covered. Knowing the Chinese scene, I mean, we know how hard it was to get Extremesland to like have English coverage take place. It was like last year was the first time in 3 years that they managed to fly us down to cover it, and even prior to that, they never really gave a shit about the English coverage. They used to like approach Chinese orgs will approach casters saying, "Hey, we'll give you the IP, cover it." And we're like, doesn't really work like that anymore. But they don't. Right? So because they don't care, they're catering. Weibo's catering to the Chinese audience. No one's going to use Weibo outside of China. They don't give a fuck. So it's cool. It's good money. They get to play. Maybe some of the lesser-known players have an opportunity to shine. Maybe you could find a potential next JamYoung out of this, which I don't really believe in. And apart from that, I really don't see anything crazy about this.
I mean, I think the wider CS:GO audience won't really care about this, but people like us who are obsessive about geographically challenged Asia would be interested to see like how, for example, this new Tyloo roster is actually going to perform against all of these teams, and is there going to be like this resurgence of like the SEA mixed teams like Huatsai and VTRG actually making an impact against the lower tiers Chinese teams, and is Thai, we will have that hopefully have that answer. Is Thai CS really like as good as it is, or it appears to be right now in the Asian region?
Smile at Pili.
Look at that smile on Pili's face. So, I think from that perspective is exciting, and I think you can't deny that Weibo, it's a legit platform, right? It's a very it's one of the most popular social media platforms in China. So them coming into the fray and kind of like putting their stance and entering esports through CS:GO, which is actually one of the most. I don't think this is the first time they're doing esports. I just mean like first time entering CS:GO, right? So like that's exciting as well for everyone. So sometimes you look at what makes a tournament prestigious is either the format or the road to get to that tournament coupled with the prize pool. But this one is not so much in the prize pool. I mean, the prize pool is significant. It's probably the biggest we've had. It is the biggest we've had all year for Asia. So that's definitely going to add some prestige to it. But then it's also Weibo coming in and making their mark. So yeah, that's the only thing that I'm kind of looking forward to.
Yeah. So for me, like, I just want to see these kinds of tournaments having more of a coverage. I want to say English coverage, right? That's sort of the easy cop-out answer, but I want to see not only that, a little bit more emphasis put on potentially trying to get the word out to the Western audience. I know that most people in general aren't interested in Asian CS, but these are the kinds of tournaments that could potentially get them interested if every single one of them was covered in English and advertised to a Western audience. And then people might go, oh, actually, Tyloo Vici in a grand final, oh, that's kind of interesting. I might watch that. But you literally don't even hear about it. Like, the only reason I heard about this tournament was because of your article, and had that not existed, I would have never found out. And there's even like a bunch of them on Liquidpedia. I think it's like an Imba TV Chinese Invitational, whatever that's going on right now. You would have no fucking idea that that's happening unless you're someone like me who's actually looking at these teams and going, what are they playing in right now? Because I haven't seen them playing anything on HLTV. Most people aren't using Liquidpedia as their platform of choice to look at what matches are going on. So yeah, I think for the Western audience, there's a massive lost opportunity from all of these Chinese tournaments. But if they were to advertise to the Western audience, I'm sure you'd get people watching it eventually. It might take a while.
But what did it get out of it, right? That's the thing. The TOs in China, they just care about a Chinese audience. And the fact that HLTV isn't covering it, who do you blame? You blame the scene. You blame the people behind the scene. They fucked it up for themselves. HLTV, I mean, for those of you who don't know about what happened, I think it's pretty obvious. I mean, out in the open, HLTV had a couple of people from China who took care of coverage for the Asian region, and they were taking bribes to put certain TO's games on HLTV, which is complete bullshit. And once HLTV found out, they're like, you know what? If we can't even trust our people who are working in China over there or in Asia, well, there's no point. It's not worth it. It's too murky, and we can't really affect our reputation over the scene. That just killed it, and I can't blame HLTV for that. I would have taken the same decision if I were them. Yeah. So yeah, it's kind of it's sad, but it do be like that sometimes.
It is like that, yeah. I mean, I think it sort of sucks that, a few individuals were the problems, I suppose. And who knows, maybe there would be 2 or 3 really good people from China that could sort of fill that role. I don't know, maybe there's an opportunity down the track where HLTV has some semblance of forgiveness for the Chinese region. I don't know whether or not we're going to get that, but yeah, I don't know. I just like to see a little bit more exposure for the Chinese tournaments to the Western audience.
And it sucks. And it really sucks because here's the thing. I know a lot of up-and-coming casters would be happy to cast it for free. It's open Go TV. You can't do a DreamHacks. You can't do the ESL because that's how I got my into commentating Counter-Strike. No one was covering the ESL Open, which is the only tournament or league happening in Asia at the time. And I was just covering it on my Twitch channel because the GoTo was available, and HLTV were kind enough to put my thing up there. The games weren't even on HLTV, just my stream on that stream.
Yeah, right.
And that's how I got my in. So it does affect a lot of opportunities for up and coming. Could be casters, could be other players and whatnot. People looking to be interested in the scene. It just hurts everyone. But there is no easy solution, and it sucks. But yeah, I mean, what can you do, right?
Is what it is. Guess that's a fairly somber note to end the show on, but there isn't too much more to talk about unless you guys have anything you want to bring up. I will give it to you, Nikh, to tell us where we can find you and give you shout outs.
Yep, it's just at CSGO to Asia for all the Asian coverage, and at Nikhathi on Twitter.
And Bleh, are you going to tell everyone to hire us for events again?
Hire us, you cunt. And you can follow me at official Bleh, right? That's my Twitter and my Instagram. I never post on Instagram, but once in a while, you might see a little spicy pic here and there.
You post melancholic stories, bro.
Listen, dog.
It's nice and dark.
He hasn't had a drink for
it's fun.
Over a month. You got to expect something.
Tomorrow, the bars open tomorrow. It's been 36 days since I've had a drink.
Oh my god! All right.
I might need to keep like the ambulance and speed dial just in case. But
How long has it been for you, Pili, since you had a drink?
I had one with my lunch today. Had a sitting right here. Had a nice cider, so it's pretty good. Yeah, I mean, follow me at PilskyCast. It's a new app. I didn't get the one that I wanted because Cheryl's still holding on to that one.
have you
sent her a
tweeted?
DM.
Have you tweeted in the past couple of weeks?
What did you say? Sorry.
Have you made a single tweet in the past like couple of weeks?
He's retweeted me a lot.
I'm gonna be definitely making some tweets this week for Rio. I'll probably already be tweeting by the time this is out. So I'm really keen to be covering that. Hope that you guys will come over and watch that. And yeah, totally agree with what everyone said. I just wish there was more coverage for this kind of thing. But we'll cover what we can. Whatever is given to us, whatever we have the chance to get our hands on, we'll be covering it. So whether it's Nikh with the CS:GO to Asia, or whether it's me and Jordan casting it, or Bleh casting it, whatever, we'll try and do it for you.
And I'm sure that we will try to get a bit more coverage as well for this Weibo thing. We'll talk about that in future episodes when we get some results from that. I think that's definitely one that we'll talk about. To touch on how much alcohol I've drunk in the last couple of days, I've had 2 bottles of soju this weekend, so I'm feeling good as well.
That's really good numbers, though.
Yeah,
it
is.
But
you're
drinking respect to MVP.
Have you guys drank with Nikh? How would you guys drag with Nikh?
Yes, if you remember, we were all in China together. Although I guess there's a reason you probably don't remember.
I don't remember.
If I remember correctly, Nikh talked us into buying a very expensive bottle of alcohol. He basically, he's like an incredible businessman. He crowdfunded a ridiculously expensive bottle of Jack Daniels in a club.
I know that I personally put $80 Australian into that.
That's right.
And I'm pretty sure Pili did the exact same. So it was $160 from just us two. Whatever else you paid for that one, Nikh. I think it was a $300 bottle of Jack Daniels.
I put in some money as well.
Yeah, I think it was a $300 bottle of Jack Daniels.
I made you all put in money. I just don't remember the amounts. I mean,
I only had one fucking glass of it. Unbelievable.
Yeah, do you know what?
I don't think I even had a sip.
I spent $80 on a glass of whiskey in China.
It ended up sitting in my lap, and whoever was just closest to me, I was just pouring them Jack Daniels, pouring the next person Jack Daniels. I mean, it's what I do anyway. Like, I mean, not anymore because of, COVID and all that stuff, but I'm a bartender by trade, so I was just pouring drinks rather than getting drunk myself. I was pouring it for myself as well.
Indeed. Anyway, that is the end of the episode. Thank you so much for watching, and make sure you watch the Road to Rio. Pili and I will be covering the Asia and ANZ component of that, which, if you're watching this when the episode releases or a couple of days afterwards, will be happening right now, basically. So definitely make sure to check that out, ESL CS:GO, where it will be. Give us a sub as well to the YouTube channel. We'd appreciate that, and follow me on Twitter and the rest of the guys as well. It's been great having them on. And it's been great having you watch, so we'll see you next time.